Hello, it's Andrea. I want to address something that is probably not going to happen, and I know this will disappoint some people. A couple of days ago, the DC reporter contended that Trump was going to announce that the FBI or the DOJ had ascertained that neither Senators Raphael Warnock nor John Ossoff of Georgia had been legitimately elected to the United States Senate. The rumor was irregularities in the 2020 election, foreign interference, all sorts of stuff. The 2020 election, of course, was when Fulton County was at the center of a national discussion about whether its election machines were improperly run, whether the shutdown of the counting center because of an alleged leak had been used to hide fraud, whether election workers were engaged in chicanery. It was a big deal. So that still follows. That was almost 6 years ago, and people are still unhappy about that. Most recently, the FBI clearly launched a massive investigation into the area. So you get things such as Nick Sorter on July 13th tweeting out, just in, President Trump will announce that both of Georgia's Democrat U.S. senators are illegitimate due to election fraud, per the D.C. reporter. This comes after FBI and other federal agencies raided election offices in Georgia recently. That's all true. And then he adds, expose it all. John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock's days in the Senate might be numbered. The first problem is that, of course, Ossoff and Warnock were not elected in the 2020 election. They were elected in subsequent runoff elections and a 2022 election, so they are not tied to the accusations that something went wrong in Fulton County in 2020. That does not mean, of course, that there aren't ongoing problems in Fulton County that may have affected subsequent elections. Certainly, from the outside looking in, Fulton County's conduct is open to question. That's all I'll say. And clearly the FBI is questioning it. So there is undoubtedly, last I heard, President Trump was scheduled to make a statement about election integrity. My suspicion is that this is simply going to be a statement pushing for the Senate to pass the Save America Act, often called the SAVE Act, which is simply about bringing election integrity to American elections. And it's something that Democrats are desperate to shut down, and that surprisingly, there is a cadre of Republicans led by Senate Majority Leader John Thune that doesn't want to pass it. Democrat Elise Stefanik. Yikes. When I said Elise Stefanik, I actually meant Elissa Slotkin. Elise Stefanik is a great Republican. Elissa Slotkin is a fervent Democrat. Let the cat out of the bag when she said if the Save America Act is passed, no Democrat will ever win an election again. Now, the way her supporters heard it is the Save America Act, by forcing people to produce ID, will mean that somehow Republicans are resorting to chicanery that will prevent Democrats from voting. It'll be like a poll tax or something. If you show the wrong ID, you'll be banned from voting. Republicans, of course, believe the opposite, that if, that's my dog, that if voters are required to prove that they're actual registered voters, who they are and that they can vote, that suddenly a lot of Democrat votes will have turned out to have come from non-citizens, from graveyards, from homeless people, from computer printers in mail-in states, and they will evaporate. So let's take the hypothetical. What happens if tonight, as part of his election integrity talk, President Trump says the FBI has discovered irregularities that make the election of the two senators from Georgia suspect, and in fact, we will prove through the evidence that they were fraudulent. What does that mean? It's not a court matter. it is purely a Senate matter, and as far as I can see, there's never been such an accusation raised in the Senate. The Senate has the power to deal with this. According to Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution, Powers and Duties of Congress, the very first line in that section is, each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. There have been lawsuits over the last 100 or so years about qualification issues, whether states can limit who can run for usually the House, the age qualifications, things like that. Number of times states have tried to impose term limits, and those have all been washed away. But actually to have the Senate determine whether an election was legitimate, it would be something new. And then, of course, the question is, how would this operate? Well, the Senate can do an investigation. You can have a senator ask for a committee to do an investigation. And you can have statements from people and the FBI testifying. You can do the whole thing. The next question, though, becomes whether the Senate will have, assuming that the investigation shows manifestly massive fraud coming out of Fulton County, not just in 2020, but in subsequent elections during which Ossoff and Warnock got their seats in the Senate. Even if the Senate investigation proves that's true, and that would be just a majority vote to have the investigation, as best as I can tell, the Senate would still need to get 2/3 of its members to vote to evict Ossoff and Warnock from their seats on the ground that they had never actually been elected, but instead were the products of fraud, whether within Fulton County or through foreign election interference. And the fact is, there is no way on God's green earth that the Senate is going to get a 2/3 vote to eject them. And that is true even if the evidence is completely clear that they were the products of fraud. And again, remember, this is all hypothetical. I'm not saying they're the objects of fraud. I'm not saying that's what the FBI has discovered, and I'm not saying that's what Trump will assert. But assuming such evidence and assuming that it's incontrovertible, that it's overwhelming, that every American can see what happened, I still believe that the Senate will not be able to muster the 2/3 vote, and that it won't only be Democrats resisting, but that it will also be the same cadre of Republicans who refuse to vote for the Save America Act. I won't speculate as to why those Republicans won't. I know that the Democrats simply can't afford to lose 2 senators or admit that there's fraud, no matter how strong the evidence. But I will remind American voters that to the extent you hate what the Senate is doing, that you hate even a Republican-run Congress, it's because we're voting for those people. And on that cheerful note, because I always leave you guys on a cheerful note, thank you so much for listening.